I slammed on the brakes so hard my purse flew off the passenger seat. The car behind me swerved, horn blaring, and I lifted a hand in a useless apology. I knew the driver couldn't even see in the dark. It was the Cardigan. That's what made me turn the car around on Bayview Avenue, 3 minutes from my own apartment, with my wedding 11 hours away. I'd been driving back from my future mother-in-law's house in Rosedale, the kind of neighborhood where the maple trees lining the street are older than the houses, and the houses are older than money, usually gets to be in Toronto. I was halfway home when my hand brushed the empty passenger seat, and I realized I didn't have it. The navy cardigan with the cream buttons, the one my mother had re-knit the collar on by hand after the wool went threadbare, the one she'd folded into my arms 3 weeks before the cancer finally took her. "Wear this when you're nervous," she'd said. "It'll be like I'm holding your shoulders." I'd left it on the back of a dining chair in Eleanor. No. In my fiancé's mother's dining room. It sounds small. I know it sounds small. But that cardigan was the last thing of my mother's that still smelled faintly like her hand cream. And I was not about to let it sit in a stranger's house overnight. Not even for one night. Not even when that stranger was about to become my family by marriage in less than 12 hours. So I turned the car around. I want to back up, though, because none of this makes sense unless you understand how good it had all looked from the outside. I'm Margot. I was 29, an occupational therapist working out of a clinic near Yonge and Eglinton, and I'd been with Desmond for 4 years. We met at a mutual friend's Canada Day barbecue, the kind where someone's uncle always burns the first batch of burgers, and nobody minds because the beer is cold and the lake is close. Desmond was an actuary, careful with numbers, careful with everything, and for a long time I thought that carefulness was exactly what I needed after growing up watching my own parents fight about overdraft fees at the kitchen table. His mother, Rosalind, was warm in that practiced magazine spread way. Always offering you tea the second you crossed the threshold, always complimenting something specific about you so it felt personal. "Margot, you have the most sensible head on your shoulders of any girl Desmond's ever brought home," she told me the first time we met, squeezing both my hands in hers. I remember feeling so relieved. I'd half expected the cold, appraising mother-in-law type, the kind my coworkers complained about over lunch. Instead, I got someone who texted me recipes and asked about my work like she actually cared what nerve damage looked like in a stroke patient's hand. His younger sister, Ren, was 23 then, still finishing her degree at Western, and she latched onto me the way younger sisters sometimes do, asking my opinion on outfits, sending me memes at midnight, telling me she wished she had a sister like me growing up. I believed every word of it. I bought her a leather portfolio for job interviews when she graduated. I helped her rewrite her resume twice. The wedding had been 18 months in the planning. Not because we needed that long, but because Rosalind had opinions about everything. A restored barn outside Niagara-on-the-Lake, the flowers. Nothing too fussy, her word. The guest list, heavy on Desmond's father's business associates. I let most of it go. I told myself it was generosity. Looking back, I think it was exhaustion. The condo was the one thing that was entirely mine, though. A 1-bedroom in Leslieville, bought outright 2 years earlier with money I'd saved since I started working at 22, plus what was left of my mother's life insurance after the funeral costs. No mortgage. Worth somewhere around $780,000 now, according to the realtor who'd assessed comparable units on my street last spring. Desmond had moved in with me 8 months ago, after we got engaged, and he'd said, more than once, in that easy, reassuring voice of his, "Doesn't matter whose name is on the deed, Margie. What's yours is mine and what's mine is yours. We're a team." I believed that too. So there I was, the night before my wedding, parking illegally on the street outside Rosalind's house because the visitor spot was taken, walking up to that big oak door with the brass knocker shaped like a pineapple. A symbol of hospitality, she'd told me once, very pleased with herself, to ring the bell and ask, sheepishly, for my cardigan back. My finger was an inch from the doorbell when I heard her voice through the screen door, which had been left open a crack behind the storm door for the evening air. Rosalind doesn't have a quiet voice. She never has. Did you see her face when I said the flowers were romantic but understated? She just eats it up, doesn't she? Lord, that girl will agree to anything if you tell her she's sensible. I froze with my hand still raised. A second voice, Ren's, answered, and there was a laugh underneath it that I had never heard from her before, not once in 4 years. "Honestly, Mom, you should win an award." I almost felt bad for her at dinner. "Don't you dare feel bad," Rosalind said. "Feeling bad is how people end up giving things away. Now, once the papers go through after the wedding, that condo gets refinanced under Desmond's name within the year. That's non-negotiable. A unit in Leslieville with no mortgage sitting there free and clear under a daughter-in-law's name, when our family put 4 years into making her feel welcome? Ridiculous. We earned that. My stomach dropped somewhere down through the porch steps. And the money from her mother, Ren added. The insurance payout, she still has like 60 grand sitting in a high-interest account. I saw it on her banking app one time when she left her phone unlocked at brunch. Once they're married, that's joint property too, right? Dad said as long as it's not kept in a separate account with a prenup, in Ontario it just becomes part of the marriage. Exactly, Rosalind said, and I could hear the smile in it, the same smile she gave me over tea, the same one. Desmond just needs to be patient, sweet to her, attentive, the whole show, for another year or so. Then we suggest he go back to school, an MBA maybe, something that requires sacrifice, and naturally her money helps cover it. By the time she figures out what's happening, if she ever does, it'll all be too entangled to easily undo. People don't walk away from entanglement, they just adjust. I stood on that porch with my heart slamming so hard I thought the storm door would pick up the vibration. The Cardigan, the actual reason I'd come, felt suddenly very far away and very stupid to care about. What about tomorrow? Ren said. At the reception, should I still do the toast where I cry a little? About how lucky Desmond is. Obviously, Rosalind said. People remember toasts, make it good. Mention the mother. Dead mothers always get everyone reaching for tissues. Very useful for the room. I don't remember deciding to take out my phone. I just remember that my hands were shaking and somehow, despite that, my thumb found the voice memo app with a kind of cold, separate precision, like it belonged to someone calmer than me. I crouched slightly, brought the phone close to the gap where the storm door met the frame, and let it run. And obviously we keep Margot's away from your father's lawyer friend, the one who does estates. No need for her getting any clever ideas about protecting her own assets before the wedding. Too late for that now anyway, the invitations are out. Rosalind laughed again. That warm laugh I used to find so comforting. Honestly, in my day mother-in-laws had to actually pretend to like their sons' wives for years before getting anything useful out of it. This generation makes it so easy. Everyone wants to believe they're loved. 2 minutes and 40 seconds. That's how long I stood there recording, my knees barely holding me up, before I finally stopped the memo, slid the phone back into my coat pocket, and stepped back off the porch as quietly as I'd come. I left the Cardigan. I left it sitting on that dining chair like a hostage I no longer had it in me to negotiate for. I don't remember the drive back to my own apartment except for the streetlights smearing past the windshield because my eyes wouldn't stop blurring. Not from crying exactly. I wasn't crying, not yet. But from something closer to shock holding my whole face tight. My dress was hanging on the back of my closet door when I walked in. Ivory, with a low back and tiny covered buttons my mother had helped me pick out at a little bridal shop on Queen Street. Back when she still had the strength to sit in those uncomfortable gold chairs for 2 hours while I tried on a dozen dresses. It had cost $4,200, which had felt extravagant and wonderful at the time, the one thing I let myself splurge on. I looked at it now and felt nothing but a strange, heavy embarrassment, like looking at a costume for a play that had already closed. I sat down on the edge of my bed and played the recording again, all the way through. I made myself listen to every word, including the parts that made my stomach turn over, because some small, ruthless part of me knew that if I didn't fully absorb it tonight, by morning I'd find a way to talk myself out of believing my own ears. Desmond texted around 11. You home safe? Big day tomorrow, lol, can't wait. I stared at that message for a long time, lol. My wedding, 12 hours away, and he'd typed lol. I didn't answer it that night. I barely slept. Not from grief exactly, more from a kind of furious clarity, my brain replaying Rosalind's voice on a loop. People don't walk away from tanglement, they just adjust. Until the ceiling above my bed turned from black to gray to the pale washed blue of a Toronto morning in late June. By 6 a.m., I'd made a decision, and making it felt like setting down something I'd been carrying for so long my arms had forgotten what it was like to be empty. I texted my cousin Imogen first, not Desmond. Imogen is a litigator at a firm downtown, the kind of cousin who shows up to family dinners with opinions about indemnity clauses. And growing up she'd been more like a big sister to me after my own mum got sick. Not for the wedding, for after the wedding doesn't happen. Can you come over before 9? She called instead of texting back. What happened? I played her the recording over speakerphone while I made coffee with hands that wouldn't quite stop shaking. There was a long silence on the other end when it finished. Margot, she said finally. Very quietly for someone usually so sharp-edged in a courtroom, do not call him yet. Do not call her. I'm coming to you right now and we're going to do this in the right order, okay? You're allowed to be devastated. You are not allowed to be reckless. Those are different things. She was at my apartment by 7:30, still in yesterday's blazer, hair pulled back in a knot, carrying her laptop bag like she was heading into court. She made me sit at my own kitchen table while she pulled out a legal pad. First, she said, "Do you own the condo outright, no mortgage?" "Yes." "Has Desmond's name been added to the title at any point, even informally, even a conversation where you said you would?" "No, it's only ever been in my name." "Good. That's the most important sentence I've heard all morning." She wrote something down. "Second, the insurance money from your mum. Separate account. His name nowhere on it? Just me. Even better. Under Ontario family law, since none of that's been commingled into joint accounts or joint purchases, you are in a genuinely strong position, Margot. Assuming you act now and not in 6 months after he's had time to talk you into joint everything as a wedding present to the marriage." She looked up at me. "Has he asked you to add his name to anything? Title, accounts, anything at all?" I thought about it, really thought, and felt something cold settle in my chest. He mentioned it, a few times, always so casually. "We should probably get my name on the condo eventually, just for tax stuff. Things like that." I always said sure, someday, no rush. Imogen's pen stopped moving. She looked at me for a second too long. "That's not casual," she said. "That's patient." The word landed exactly the way Rosalind's voice had landed on that porch. "Here's what we're going to do," Imogen said, switching into the brisk, organized voice I imagine she uses with actual clients. "You are going to send Desmond one text. Short, no explanations yet, because explanations right now just give them time to build a counter-narrative before you've even left the building. Then we call the venue, we call the officiant, and we let me handle the family side of things from this point forward. You are done being the one who explains herself to that family. Understood?" I nodded, my throat too tight to talk. I opened my messages and found Desmond's name. His profile photo still our engagement picture from Algonquin Park last September, both of us windburned and grinning by the lake. I typed deleted, typed again. "The wedding is off. Don't come to the venue. I'll explain through my lawyer." I hit send before I could rewrite it into something softer. Within 90 seconds, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Desmond calling again, then a text from Ren that just said Kamek. "Are you serious right now?" Then a missed call from a number I didn't recognize that I'd later learn was Rosalind. Calling from her landline because she assumed I might pick up for an unfamiliar number out of politeness the way I always used to. I turned the phone face down on the table. Imogen put her hand flat over it, like she could physically hold the chaos underneath in place. "Let it ring," she said. "Today, your only job is to breathe." By 9, Imogen had reached the venue coordinator and the officiant, citing an urgent personal matter, handling it in the clipped, unbothered tone of someone who does difficult phone calls for a living. By 10, she drafted a short formal letter on her firm's letterhead, addressed to Desmond, copying Rosalind, stating plainly that Margot Whitfield was represented by counsel, that all future communication regarding the cancelled wedding, any jointly discussed financial matters, and any prior loans extended to members of his family. Because yes, there had been loans, I'll get to those, were to go through her office, and that any attempt at direct contact, pressure, or what she termed coercive persuasion would be documented accordingly. I sat at my kitchen table in yesterday's clothes, the wedding dress still hanging silently on the closet door behind me, like a guest who hadn't gotten the cancellation memo, and I let someone else hold the line for the first time in years. The loans. I should explain those, because once Imogen had me sit down and actually go through my banking records that afternoon. And I mean actually open every statement going back 3 years, something I'd never once done because it felt rude, like I was keeping score on family. The total came to just over $14,000, not all at once. A few hundred here for Ren's textbooks. $600 when Rosalind's car needed a transmission repair, just until Gerald's bonus comes through. Gerald being Desmond's father, whose bonus apparently never quite arrived. $2,200 for a family emergency, 18 months ago that I now suspected, looking at the dates, lined up suspiciously close to a trip Rosalind and her sister took to Cancun. The largest single transfer, $3,800, had gone toward catering deposits we'll square up after the wedding. Money I'd handed over, without blinking, because of course you help pay for your own wedding. Except I was the only one who'd actually paid. "You're not a bank," Imogen said flatly, looking at the spreadsheet she'd made me build out loud while she watched. "You're not even a particularly generous family friend at this point. You're an unpaid line of credit who occasionally got flowers." That landed harder than I expected. I laughed, and it came out cracked. By early afternoon, Desmond had stopped calling and started texting instead. The messages shifting register the way they always seemed to when he didn't get the reaction he wanted right away. "This is insane, Margie. You're really doing this the day of? Without even talking to me?" Then, 20 minutes later, "Whatever you think you heard." It's not what you think. I hadn't told him what I'd heard. I hadn't said one word about the porch, about Rosalind's voice through the screen door, about the recording. Imogen, reading over my shoulder, raised an eyebrow at that text and said nothing, but I understood what her silence meant. He already knew. Of course he already knew. His mother had probably called him within minutes of finding the cardigan still draped over that dining chair and putting it together. Me at the door, the timing, the fact that I'd left without ringing the bell. I didn't reply to any of it. Imogen had been right. The version of me that explained herself, that softened bad news to make other people more comfortable, had to be retired, at least for today. Rosalind tried once more around 6 that evening, this time leaving a voicemail in a tone so gentle and wounded it almost worked on the part of me that had spent 4 years wanting her approval. Margot, sweetheart. I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding, and I just want the chance to sit down with you, just the two of us, the way we always have. You know how much I love you. You're the daughter I never had. I deleted it without finishing the last sentence. I slept that night, actually slept, for the first time in what felt like weeks, in my own bed in my own condo that nobody's name was on but mine, with the dress still hanging there in the dark like something from a museum exhibit about a life I'd almost walked into. The days after were quieter than I expected, and louder in other ways. My coworker Priya noticed first, the Monday after, when I came back to the clinic looking, in her words, like someone who slept through a fire alarm and is fine with it. I told her the truth in 3 sentences over our shared kettle in the break room. Wedding off. Overheard something I wasn't meant to hear. Lawyer involved. And she didn't push for more. Just squeezed my arm and said, "Good. You look tired in a way that wasn't your usual tired the last few months. People always notice more than you think, in hindsight. You just can't see it from inside the relationship." The gossip moved faster than I expected through the wider circle. Rosalind's sister, apparently, had quite a lot to say at a hair salon in Forest Hill, and within a week a version of the story had reached people I barely knew, the kind where I was the cold, ungrateful girl who humiliated a respectable family the day before her own wedding, for reasons nobody could quite explain. A second cousin of Desmond's messaged me directly, a woman I'd met exactly twice, to ask, with what she clearly thought was gentle concern, whether I'd always struggled with commitment. I read it, closed the app, and didn't reply. Imogen's advice had stuck with me by then. You don't owe a courtroom of strangers your evidence. You only owe it to the people who actually deserve an explanation. And that list is shorter than you think. 2 weeks in, Imogen sent the formal demand letter for the $14,000 itemized, dated, with bank transfer records attached as exhibits. Gerald, Desmond's father. A man I'd maybe exchanged 200 words with across 4 years of family dinners. Because he mostly watched golf, with the volume too low to actually hear, was apparently the one who finally pushed for repayment in installments rather than risk a small claims filing with his name attached to it. Which told me something about who actually ran finances quietly behind that big oak door. The first $1,100 hit my account on a Tuesday morning, while I was charting a patient's grip strength scores. I stared at the notification for a second, felt almost nothing, not triumph, just a strange flat steadiness, like a level finally settling after being tilted for years, and went back to my chart. Desmond called one more time, almost a month after the wedding that never happened. And for some reason I picked up. "I'm not asking you to come back," he said, fast, like he'd rehearsed it and was afraid of losing his nerve. "I just need to know if you ever actually loved me, or if I was, I don't know, a means to an end the way they were using you for one." I sat with that question longer than he probably expected. "I did love you," I said finally. That's the part that makes this hardest to explain to people who weren't on that porch. I loved you and I still left, because loving someone was never supposed to mean making myself smaller and more useful for 4 years so a family I trusted could quietly take what was mine. You let it happen, Desmond. Maybe you didn't plan it the way she did. But you let it happen, and you let it happen for a long time. He didn't have an answer for that. I didn't really need him to. The dress sat in its box at the back of my closet for almost 2 months before I did anything about it. I'd open the closet some mornings looking for a sweater, and catch sight of the white edge of the box and feel something tighten in my chest. Not grief exactly. More like the discomfort of an unfinished sentence. Then one Saturday in late August, scrolling through a community board for my neighborhood, I saw a post from a settlement support organization in the East End, helping newcomer brides, many of them refugee or low-income women starting over in Toronto with nothing, find wedding dresses they couldn't otherwise afford. I drove the box over myself instead of shipping it. The volunteer who took it from me, a woman maybe 10 years older than my own mother would have been, held it up gently and said, "Someone is going to feel like a queen in this." I cried a little in the parking lot afterward, but it wasn't the kind of crying that hurts. It felt more like setting something down correctly, finally, after carrying it wrong for a long time. I kept the condo, obviously. I repainted the bedroom a soft sage green that fall, something Desmond had always vetoed as too cold, and it turned out to be the warmest room in the apartment once the afternoon light hit it. I picked up the cardigan. Eventually, Imogen went and collected it from Rosalind's porch for me 3 weeks after everything, because I genuinely could not bring myself to set foot on that street again, and she handed it to me without a word, already washed, smelling faintly of someone else's laundry detergent instead of my mother's hand cream. And I cried harder over that small loss than I had over almost anything else in the whole ordeal. But I wear it now anyway. The smell faded. The stitching my mother fixed with her own hands didn't. At work, I took on a new caseload that winter, specializing in stroke rehabilitation, the kind of work that requires patience measured in months, not days, watching someone relearn how to hold a fork. My supervisor told me in December I had a calm with patients she hadn't seen before, something steadier underneath it. I think I know where that steadiness came from. You don't get handed it. You build it, usually on a night when you're standing on someone's porch, with your hand frozen an inch from a doorbell, finding out exactly what you're worth to the people who were supposed to value you, and deciding, right there in the dark, that you're worth considerably more than that. I ran into Desmond once more, almost a year later, at a coffee shop near my new office in Leaside. He looked thinner, a little grayer at the temples than a man in his early 30s should be. We talked for maybe 4 minutes, nothing important. The careful small talk of two people who used to know each other's whole lives and now know nothing past the weather. As I left, he said, "You look good, Margie. Really good." I said thank you, and I meant it as nothing more than what it was. 2 true, separate words, and walked out into the cold without looking back to see his face. I never did get an apology from Rosalind. I stopped expecting one somewhere around month 3. Once I understood that an apology requires believing you did something wrong. And she never once believed that. To her, I think, I'll always be the daughter-in-law who got away with something, rather than the daughter-in-law who simply refused to be taken from anymore. My mother used to say, near the end, when she was too tired to say much of anything at all, that she just wanted me to live well. Not carefully, not smally, just well for myself, the way she never quite managed to for the last few years of her own life. I think about that cardigan a lot, the reason I turned the car around in the first place. The small thread that accidentally unraveled an entire carefully constructed ally. I didn't go back that night to save myself. I went back for a sweater. I just happened to find my whole life instead.